Imagine spending your whole life thinking you were completely alone in the world until one day you turn on the TV and see your own face staring back at you, not in a mirror, but in a different state, with a different name and a different life. What if you found out you weren't an only child, not even a twin, but a part of a set of quadruplets separated at birth, well, on purpose, as part of a secret psychological experiment? And the worst part? The woman who raised you, who you called Mom, may have known all along. But before we begin, tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? There are neighborhoods that feel like they were built to keep secrets. Cedar Creek, a quiet residential pocket just outside of Portland, Oregon, was one of them. A place where the air always smelled slightly damp, even in the summer, because of the thick curtain of moss that blanketed the trees. Streets were lined with mailboxes that hadn't changed in 20 years, and the same dogs barked at the same mailman every morning. Life there was a rhythm, a loop, comfortable, predictable, forgettable. But for Michael Turner, it was all too quiet. He walked to work at the university library every morning, taking the long way down Powell Avenue past the abandoned toy shop that still had dusty plastic dinosaurs in the display window. The streets had changed little since his childhood. The same uneven sidewalk cracks, the same rusted lampposts, but nothing made him feel like he belonged. Michael was 34, unmarried, no kids, no siblings, at least not that he knew of. He had a memory for details that made people nervous. He noticed when a barista changed her earrings. He remembered the exact sound of someone's cough in a silent lecture hall. He was calm, polite, and invisible. Most people only remembered him by his glasses and the fact that he always wore navy blue jackets, even in June. And Michael had a secret. It wasn't the kind of secret you could put into words because it didn't exist on paper. It was a feeling, a persistent echo of something missing, like walking into a room and forgetting what you came for. But all the time, as far back as he could remember, he'd had flashes, vivid, emotional bursts of things that never happened. A boy's laugh he couldn't place, a backyard swing that didn't belong to any house he'd ever lived in, a scar on a stranger's arm that made his chest tighten for no reason at all. But he never talked about it. The first time he said anything out loud, he was 8. He told his mother, Angela Turner, that he missed the other boy. She froze, turned off the kitchen faucet, and slowly wiped her hands on a dish towel. "What other boy, Michael?" she asked, too calmly. "I don't know, but I miss him." Angela didn't speak for a moment. Then she knelt, took his face in her hands, and said, "You're my only boy. You've always been my only boy." And that was that. After that day, any trace of curiosity was gently but firmly extinguished. Whenever Michael brought up dreams that felt like memories or people who felt familiar for no reason, his mother redirected the conversation. "You read too much." Maybe it was a movie. Some dreams feel real, but they're not. But some dreams left fingerprints. It was on a Thursday that everything began to unravel. Michael was shelving books in the psychology section when he heard 2 undergrads whispering behind the stacks. He wasn't trying to eavesdrop. They were just loud. One of them said, "Did you see the news clip of that firefighter in Atlanta? Dude looks just like that librarian here. What's his name? The quiet guy." Michael paused. The girls laughed and wandered off, but something cold settled in his stomach. That night, alone in his apartment, he searched for Atlanta Firefighter Child Rescue. The story had gone viral the day before, a firefighter pulling a toddler from a burning building just moments before the roof collapsed. The man's name was Lucas Bellamy. Michael froze as the screen loaded. The face that appeared was his, not similar, identical. Same brown eyes, same jawline, same hairline. A mirrored version of himself, only stockier and with a shaved head. Michael leaned forward, staring at the screen, his breath shallow. The man even had the same tiny scar above his right eyebrow, a scar Michael had never been able to explain. He'd asked his mother once how he got it. She'd said it was from falling off a bike as a kid, but he'd never owned a bike. He clicked on Lucas's profile. Firefighter for 11 years. Born in Atlanta, Georgia. Adopted as a newborn. No siblings listed. Michael sat back in his chair, heart pounding, ears ringing. Something inside him broke open. It wasn't just that he saw someone who looked like him. It was that something inside him recognized him, and he wasn't alone anymore. The next morning, Michael arrived at the university an hour earlier than usual. He skipped coffee. He skipped his usual walk past the toy store. Instead, he sat at a table in the back corner of the archives room, surrounded by yellowing birth records, old adoption registries, and faculty logbooks from the 1980s. He didn't know what he was looking for, but he knew what he needed, the truth. He started with what little he remembered from his own adoption, which wasn't much. Angela had told him once, when he was 12 and asking too many questions, that he was adopted privately through a Lutheran agency in New York. She hadn't wanted children, she said. She hadn't planned to raise one alone. But when they showed her his picture, she felt something shift. Michael had never known his biological parents' names, never seen a birth certificate, never seen any paperwork at all, actually, so he requested his own. That day at the state records office, the clerk glanced at the file, then frowned. "This file's sealed," she said. Michael blinked. "But it's mine," she shrugged. "Sealed at the agency level. You'd need a court order to open it." Michael stood there, confused. "But I just want to see my name, where I was born, my mother's name." The woman gave him a sympathetic look. "Sometimes sealed means sealed, especially with older adoptions." Michael stepped away from the counter, suddenly aware of how shaky his hands were. He thanked her, walked out, and stood on the sidewalk for a long time. The cars passed. The world kept moving, but something inside him had stopped. He wasn't just an only child. He was a sealed file, a secret. That weekend he called his mother. Angela still lived in the same craftsman-style house he grew up in, surrounded by planters full of dry lavender and wind chimes that hadn't made a sound in years. When she opened the door, her face lit up, as it always did, but she paused when she saw his expression. "Michael, is everything okay?" He stepped inside and sat on the couch before speaking. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth." Angela stood silently for a beat, then sat across from him, folding her hands in her lap. "All right." He pulled out his phone and showed her a photo of Lucas Bellamy. Angela's face drained of color. "Who is this?" Michael asked. She blinked, opened her mouth, closed it again. "I don't know. He was adopted in Atlanta, born the same year as me, same month. He looks like me, Mom, exactly like me." She swallowed hard. "Lots of people look alike." "No, they don't." Angela closed her eyes. For a moment she looked like someone holding a glass that had just cracked in their hands. "There was a letter," she finally said. "Before I adopted you, from the agency. They asked if I'd be open to taking two. Twins, they said. But I wasn't ready. I didn't think I could do it alone. I said no. They said it was fine, that the other boy had a home already." Michael's pulse roared in his ears. "You never told me." "I thought it didn't matter. You were enough. You were mine." "But I had a brother." Angela didn't answer. The silence in the room was louder than any scream. 2 weeks later, Michael stood in the rain outside Fire Station 17 in Atlanta, Georgia. He didn't call ahead, didn't send a message. Just got on a plane with the printed photo of Lucas in his jacket pocket and a silent promise that he wouldn't leave without answers. When the door opened, Michael didn't recognize the man who stepped out at first, not until he looked up. Lucas froze. They stared at each other, identical, same height, same voice, same blood. Neither spoke for a long time. Finally, Lucas whispered, "What the hell is this?" Michael stepped forward. "I think we're brothers." Lucas blinked. "I don't have a brother." Michael swallowed. "Neither did I." They sat in silence at a diner down the street, 2 mugs of untouched coffee steaming between them. Lucas was cautious, defensive, but he listened. Michael showed him everything: photos, records, the sealed file, the note his mother remembered about the twins. Lucas said nothing. Then, slowly, he pulled out his wallet and showed Michael something he'd never shown anyone else: a photo of himself at 3 years old standing in front of a wooden fence. Beside him was another boy. Same height, same face, same haircut. "My foster parents said it was a neighbor's kid," Lucas said. "But I always felt like I knew him, like I missed him." Michael's hands trembled. "What if there were more of us?" he said softly. Lucas looked up. Michael's voice was barely a whisper. "What if we weren't just twins?" Cliffhanger, Final Due, Block 01. Michael pulls out an old VHS tape he found in a university archive box labeled Subject B, Observation, July 1989. He hasn't watched it yet. Lucas leans in, reading the label. Subject B? Michael looks up. There could have been a Subject A. Michael Turner had always been a quiet child. The kind of kid who sat at the edge of the playground, watching others more than joining in. He had a natural ability to remember the smallest things: names of kids who moved away after one semester, the exact number of stairs in the school building, even the melody of the class bell before it was replaced in 1999. He was curious, not the loud, adventurous kind. His curiosity was subtle, methodical. He didn't want to climb the tree. He wanted to know how old it was, why one branch leaned slightly more than the others, and whether birds preferred that branch to perch on. His mother, Angela Turner, never discouraged his quiet nature. In fact, she encouraged it, sometimes too much. "People who talk less, listen more," she'd say, "and the world needs listeners." Angela worked as a nurse her whole life. Stern but fair, emotionally reserved but loyal, she raised Michael alone in the yellow house with peeling shutters on Chestnut Street. She never remarried, never dated anyone, at least not openly. Everything in her life revolved around Michael, and protecting whatever it was she feared he might discover. She gave him books before toys, taught him how to spell conscience before he could tie his shoes. She let him wander the local library for hours, as long as he promised to be home before sunset. When other mothers were setting curfews or monitoring screen time, Angela was watching for something else, something she never named. Michael never questioned it. Until now. He spent most of his days in the university library's lower level, organizing archival donations, boxes of records from former professors, old lab notes, grant proposals, faded microfilms. Most people avoided the basement floor. It was always cold, and the overhead lights had a habit of flickering, casting long shadows across the rows of shelves. But Michael liked it down there. It was a place where things didn't pretend to be anything they weren't. Dust was dust. Silence was silence. There was a kind of honesty in it. Still, even in his favorite corner of the world, something inside him had started to stir. Ever since seeing Lucas Bellamy on that screen, Michael's world felt like a drawer that wouldn't quite close. Like he was suddenly aware of the gaps, spaces where things should have been, childhood photos with cropped edges. His mother's occasional silence when he asked about his early years, the way she'd always stiffen when he brought up dreams that felt like memories. He started keeping a journal, not the kind with emotions or poetry, but an organized log of what he knew versus what he didn't. Page 1 read, Known, born March 14, 1989, adopted by Angela Turner, single parent, no siblings. Agency, New Life Lutheran Services, New York, first home, Rochester, NY, moved to Portland in 1996, No biological family ever contacted me. Unknown biological parents' names, birth hospital, why file is sealed, any siblings, anomalies, scar above right eye, unknown origin, persistent dreams of shared childhood, recognition upon seeing Lucas Bellamy. He kept the notebook with him at all times, in his backpack, in his nightstand, under the counter when he worked. He didn't know what he was looking for, but the act of writing it down made the silence louder. It also made it real. Michael's closest friend, if you could call him that, was a literature professor named Henry Lim. In his late 40s, Henry had a dry wit, a permanent coffee stain on his shirt, and an encyclopedic knowledge of American postmodern fiction. He was also one of the few people who noticed when Michael seemed off. "You've been quieter than usual," Henry said one afternoon, walking into the staff lounge with a stack of books under his arm. "And that's saying something." Michael forced a small smile. "Just thinking a lot. Thinking leads to madness. Trust me. I teach Don DeLillo." Michael hesitated, then asked, "Do you believe people can remember things that never happened?" Henry raised an eyebrow. "You mean like collective false memories, Mandela effect stuff?" "No," Michael said. "I mean, what if something did happen, but someone erased it, covered it up? Could your mind still remember somewhere underneath?" Henry sat down slowly, his expression softening. "Sounds more like trauma than literature." Michael shook his head. "I'm not sure what it is." There was a pause. Henry looked at him carefully. "You know I grew up in foster care, right?" Michael nodded. "I used to dream about a girl with braids. I swore we shared a room, but no one ever confirmed it. No records, nothing. Then one day, when I was 30, I saw a picture in a state file, a picture of me. And there she was, in the background, watching me." Michael froze. Henry continued, "Sometimes the mind holds on tighter than the world allows." It was the first time Michael felt seen. That night, he pulled out the VHS tape he'd brought home. He hadn't told Lucas he watched it first. Something told him he needed to do it alone. He dug out an old VCR player from the closet, one he hadn't used since high school, and sat on the floor of his living room, legs crossed, remote in hand. He pushed the tape in. A moment of static. Then a timestamp flickered onto the screen. July 3rd, 1989, 14:17. The image cleared to reveal a room. White walls, padded floor, no furniture, a single camera set high in the corner. In the center were two toddlers, maybe 3 or 4 years old, both boys. Both barefoot, both wearing identical shirts. One had a red ball, the other had a picture book. Michael's heart stopped. They were identical. Perfectly so. One of them was him. He recognized the small freckle on the neck, the same body language, the way he tilted his head when confused. The other boy was Lucas. The footage was silent. But the boys interacted naturally. One handed the ball to the other. They switched toys. They giggled. A figure entered the room briefly. A woman in a lab coat checked something on the wall, then stepped out. Michael fast-forwarded. More interactions, more playing. Then, slowly, the boys were led out separately by different attendants. The tape ended. Michael stared at the blue screen, numb. They knew. Whoever filmed that tape, whoever had those boys under surveillance, they knew the boys were together, and they separated them anyway. This wasn't just adoption. This was something else. He called Lucas at midnight. "I watched the tape," Michael said. Silence. "They knew," he whispered. "We were together, as kids. There was a room, a camera. It was all observed." Lucas didn't speak for a long time. Then, "I want to see it." 3 days later, Lucas flew to Portland. They watched the tape together. He didn't cry, but after it ended, he asked only one question. "Where's the rest of it?" Michael blinked. "What do you mean?" "That wasn't the first session," Lucas said. "You could tell, the way we played together. It wasn't the first time. We knew each other. We trusted each other." Michael had felt it too. They had a bond, one that didn't form in minutes. "How many tapes do you think there are?" Lucas asked. Michael didn't know, but he knew where to start looking. They returned to the archives where Michael worked. The box the VHS had come from was part of an unprocessed collection donated by a retired psychology professor. Most of the boxes were filled with old slides and behavioral studies from the 80s and 90s, mostly child development experiments. But one box stood out. It had no label, just a faded piece of masking tape with cedar wood scribbled on it in blue ink. Michael's hands trembled as he opened it. Inside, several VHS tapes, a folder of typewritten notes, and a photo. The photo showed a woman holding 3 newborns, triplets. Michael couldn't breathe. Lucas stared at the photo in disbelief. Michael turned the picture over. On the back, in neat handwriting, subjects A, B, and C, assigned 3/21/89, Cedarwood Project. He and Lucas weren't just twins. They were 2/3 of something. A third brother was out there, somewhere, and no one had ever told them. Michael flips through the folder and finds a page labeled Subject C, Status Deferred. No name, no photo, only a single handwritten note. Removed from observational protocol, placed under long-term psychiatric supervision. Monitor quarterly. Rain slid in long, uneven streaks down the windows of Michael's apartment as he laid out every document, photo, and VHS tape across the living room floor. Lucas paced behind him, hands clenched, unable to sit still. "There's someone out there," Lucas said. "A third brother. And whoever was running this, they buried him." Michael nodded silently. The note about Subject C kept repeating in his mind like a warning he couldn't ignore. Removed from observational protocol. Placed under long-term psychiatric supervision. Why was he removed? What happened? And, most terrifying of all, was he even alive? Lucas stopped pacing. "You still have access to the university archives, right?" Michael looked up. "Yeah. But if they hid this under an anonymous box labeled Cedarwood, I doubt they just left a folder labeled Third Brother, Classified." Lucas raised an eyebrow. "Then we find the people who did this, and we make them talk." That night, Lucas went to sleep on the pull-out sofa. Michael stayed up. He couldn't stop staring at the image of the woman holding the 3 babies. Her face was half obscured by shadow, but something about her posture felt forced, like she knew the picture would be used for more than a baby album. Behind her was a plain white wall and a clock showing 10:12. Michael turned the photo over again, fingers tracing the ink. Subjects A, B, and C assigned 3/21/89, Cedarwood Project. He typed the phrase into every academic database he could access. JSTOR, PubMed, PsycInfo. Nothing came up, no matches, no mentions. It was as if the project had been erased. But when he searched the general internet, buried on page 5 of the results, he found something. A mention in an obscure forum thread archived from the early 2000s. The title of the post, Cedarwood, Behavioral Separation Studies, Who Remembers? The user who posted it was anonymous. The post itself was vague. But one sentence leapt off the screen. "There were others. I was Subject F." Michael's heart skipped. Others? Was this bigger than just triplets? He clicked the username. The account was inactive. But there was one email link in the user profile, kramos82excite.com. It was a long shot. The domain itself was ancient. But he sent an email anyway. Subject, Cedarwood Project. I read your post. I think I was Subject B. Do you know anything about Subject C? Please respond. M. He hit send. And waited. The next morning, the reply was in his inbox. From kramos1982excite.com. Subject, Cedarwood Project. You're not the first one to find me. I only talk in person. 3 p.m., 23rd and Belmont. Wear something red. Come alone. No photos. If you bring anyone, I walk. Lucas wasn't happy about it. Sketchy emails, secret meetups? He shook his head. Michael, you're not built for this. Michael didn't disagree, but he also didn't care. I have to go. The cafe on 23rd and Belmont was tucked between a laundromat and a pawn shop, dim with fogged-up windows and a jukebox in the corner that hadn't worked since the 90s. Michael wore a red scarf and ordered black coffee. He sat near the back, facing the door. At exactly 3:07, a woman walked in, short, late 40s, wearing a faded leather jacket and sunglasses even though it was cloudy. She didn't speak at first. She scanned the room, saw the red scarf, and sat across from him. Name? She asked. Michael Turner, she nodded. I'm Karina. Ramos. Subject F. Michael blinked. You're one of us? She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I was part of the Cedarwood experiments. Different group. I had a sister, fraternal twin. They split us too. What happened to her? She died when we were 16. Suicide? Michael looked down. Karina sipped her tea. I started remembering things a few years ago. Patterns. Flashbacks. I found one of the doctors who used to work at Cedarwood. A guy named Howard Klein, retired now, living off the grid. Michael felt his pulse quicken. He was in one of the notes we found. Karina raised an eyebrow. Then you're further along than most, but be careful. Once you start digging into Cedarwood, someone will try to shut you down. Who? She leaned in. It wasn't just scientists running that project. There were sponsors, quiet donors, people who wanted to answer one big question. What matters more, blood or environment? Michael's mouth went dry. Do you know anything about Subject C? Karina sat back. I've heard whispers. They said Subject C was pulled from the study. Something went wrong. He stopped responding to the protocols, had violent episodes. They sent him to a psychiatric facility. Off-grid, not government-funded, private. Michael's eyes narrowed. Where? Karina hesitated. Then she reached into her jacket and slid over a faded business card. It read, Willow Ridge Behavioral Center, a place for calm minds. Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Be careful, Karina said. You think you want the truth, but truth has teeth. Then she stood, left her tea unfinished, and walked out. Michael and Lucas sat in silence as they stared at the card. Lucas broke it first. We need to go. Michael didn't respond. Today, Lucas added, we get on a plane, we show them our IDs. Maybe our faces will be enough. Maybe he'll recognize us. Michael finally looked up. And if he doesn't? Lucas paused. Then we'll recognize him. They flew out that night. The flight to Harrisburg was long and quiet. Michael couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the photo of the triplets. 3 boys who had no idea how far they'd be flung from each other. At 6:43 a.m., they arrived. By 8:00, they were standing in front of Willow Ridge Behavioral Center, a large gray building surrounded by pine trees. It looked more like a forgotten mansion than a hospital. There was no sign, just a small brass plate by the door. Inside, the receptionist looked up, startled. We're here to visit a patient, Lucas said. We don't have a name, but we believe he's our brother. The receptionist frowned. You're... what? Michael stepped forward. We think we were part of an experiment, a study. We found a file that led us here. Please, just check if anyone here was admitted under the name Subject C, or even no name at all. The woman hesitated, then stood. Wait here. They waited. 10 minutes later, a man in a white coat appeared. Late 60s. Hair like silver wire. Thin-rimmed glasses. He introduced himself as Dr. Meyer. You boys believe you have a sibling here? Michael and Lucas both nodded. Dr. Meyer studied their faces for a long time. Then he said, Come with me. They followed him down a long corridor with faded blue tiles and humming lights overhead. The walls were decorated with bland landscape paintings, trees, lakes, mountains, but each one was off-center in its frame, like someone had hung them in a hurry. Dr. Myers stopped in front of a locked door. "He doesn't speak," he said. "At least, not in the way you expect. We don't use names here, only initials. He's known as J." Lucas's voice was low. "He's alive?" Dr. Meyer nodded. "But I don't know if you'll get through to him." He opened the door. Inside was a small room, clean, minimal. A bed, a bookshelf, a window facing a courtyard, and in the corner, sitting on the floor, was a man, mid-30s, thin, pale, staring at a chessboard set up with pieces in the wrong places. When he looked up, Michael felt the air leave his lungs. It was like looking into a cracked mirror. Their brother, Subject C. The man, J, stared at them. No emotion, no reaction. Lucas whispered, "Hey, it's us, your brothers." No answer. Michael knelt. "Do you remember us?" Still nothing. Then slowly, Jay reached toward the chessboard and moved a piece, knight to F3. Michael blinked. That was the first move in a specific chess opening, the same one he always played when he was little. Lucas sat beside them. "We used to play in the room," he said softly, "with the red ball and the picture book." Jay tilted his head. Michael pulled out the photo of the triplets and held it up. "This is us," he whispered. "All three of us." Jay stared at the photo. Then, without warning, he reached out and touched the image. His fingers stopped over the middle child, over himself. And he began to hum, a melody, soft, familiar. Lucas's eyes widened. "I know that song." Michael did too. It was the tune they used to hum while playing. They didn't have words for it. It was just the song, their song. Suddenly, Jay looked up and spoke just one word. "Run." The moment Jay said, "Run," everything stopped. Lucas froze. Michael blinked. Dr. Meyer looked stunned, but not surprised. Then Jay's eyes darted to the corner of the room, toward a small vent in the ceiling. His fingers trembled. He pointed again, more urgently now. Michael followed his gaze. There was a blinking red light inside the vent. A camera. "What is this place?" Lucas snapped. Dr. Meyer didn't answer. Michael stood. "Are we being recorded, Dr.?" Meyer finally spoke calmly. "This facility has surveillance in every patient room, for safety." "But you said he doesn't speak," Michael replied. "And yet here he is, speaking, pointing, warning us." The doctor didn't flinch. "That's new. He hasn't said a word in years." "Convenient timing," Lucas muttered. Michael turned back to Jay. He was now sitting perfectly still, silent again, as if he hadn't said anything at all. The humming started again, soft, nervous. Michael felt a chill crawl up his spine. "Lucas," he whispered, "he's scared." They left the room in silence. Dr. Meyer offered no explanation, no additional information, just a calm, practiced smile as he walked them to the front entrance. "If you'd like to request supervised visitation in the future, you may submit an application through our administrative office," he said, as if discussing a parking violation. Michael stared at him. "You're hiding something." Dr. Meyer held the door open. "Everyone's hiding something, Mr. Turner." Lucas didn't speak until they were back in the car. "I want to break him out," he said. Michael rubbed his temples. "We can't, not yet, not without knowing what they're capable of. They're capable of separating babies and putting them under observation like lab rats. What else do you need?" Michael hesitated. "Proof. We need to know what happened, how far it went, and who else was involved." Lucas gripped the steering wheel. "Then let's find out." They returned to Portland the next day. Neither of them spoke much on the flight. Both were processing the same realization. Their lives had never belonged to them. Michael dove back into the archives. He stopped shelving books, stopped checking emails. He requested access to every behavioral research log from the 1980s through early 2000s. Most of it was banal: child literacy programs, sleep studies, minor clinical trials. But then he found a file labeled CW. Data transfer 1993. Closure, internal eyes only. CW Cedarwood. The file was thin, only 8 pages, but each one was haunting. Entry 3. Subject C displayed increased aggression in session 27. Removed ball from subject B and initiated repeated strikes to head. Intervention initiated at T plus 2.17. Terminated session. Entry 5. Subjects B and C display intuitive bonding patterns unexplainable by standard developmental models. Consider genetic override. Entry 6. Subject A removed after signs of severe dissociation and suicidal ideation. Subject deemed non-viable for observational integrity, placed in institutional facility for ongoing containment and monitoring. Subject A? Michael read the entry again. Subject A removed after signs of severe dissociation. He turned cold. They had labeled J as Subject C. That meant the missing one was someone else. There was a fourth child, not a triplet, a quadruplet. Someone had hidden the existence of a fourth sibling. That night, Michael shared the findings with Lucas. The two sat at their kitchen table, surrounded by open folders and papers, like detectives at the end of their rope. Lucas leaned back. "We're not triplets," Michael nodded. "No, we were 4. Lucas stared at the ceiling. How the hell did they keep that a secret? Michael didn't answer, but Karina Ramos might. They met her again 2 days later, in a motel just off I-5. She looked more tired this time, paler. She had bruises under her eyes. "You were followed," she said bluntly, as Michael and Lucas sat across from her. "What?" Lucas asked. "You've stirred up something that doesn't like to be seen. People are watching you. They've watched me for years. Phone taps, letters that vanish, jobs that fall through, quiet pressure, just enough to make you question your own sanity." Michael leaned forward. There was a fourth, another sibling. Karina's face didn't change. She simply nodded. "Subject D. That's what I heard. A male, removed entirely from all records. No one knew where he went." Michael pulled out the Cedarwood file, showed her the notes. She exhaled slowly. "You found the internal logs," Lucas asked. "Can we track him?" Karina hesitated. "If he's alive, he's not where you'd expect. They said he was unstable, beyond recovery, but I don't buy that. You don't erase someone unless they matter." Michael spoke quietly. "We need a name." Karina reached into her bag and handed over a laminated photo ID. It showed a boy, around 10 years old, standing beside a man in a lab coat. The boy had the same eyes, same cheekbones, same scar above the right brow. Michael's hands shook. "Where was this taken?" he asked. Karina whispered, "Cedarwood. Before the fire." Lucas's head snapped up. "What fire?" Karina looked at them both. "They burned it down in 1993 to cover everything." Michael and Lucas flew to Rochester, New York, where Cedarwood Behavioral Institute once stood. Now the lot was empty, overgrown. The only trace of the building was a rusted metal fence and a cracked foundation half covered in moss. But something was still there. They found the remains of a basement stairwell, half filled with debris but partially accessible. Lucas broke through the boards, and together they descended with flashlights. What they found made both men stop breathing. A room. Blackened walls, burnt shelving, scorch marks, but one filing cabinet had survived. It was sealed shut. Lucas pried it open with a crowbar. Inside, a single folder wrapped in plastic. D1 report, redacted, classified level 3. They opened it. Inside, photos, graphs, psychological assessments, and a name. Daniel Eastman, Diob, 3 EUS 14, 1989, Placed into Cedarwood Protocol, Phase 1, May 1989, removed from standard study. Relocated to undisclosed care facility in Vermont. Silo program. Michael stared at the page. Daniel, the 4th. Cliffhanger final to Block 04. The last page of the file was a hand-scrawled note in faded red ink. Subject D is aware of the others. He asked for them by name. If they ever find each other, shut it down. Vermont looked peaceful from above. The forests were endless. Rolling hills of pine and maple trees turned gold and red in the late afternoon sun. It looked like a postcard, but Michael knew better. Beauty could hide the ugliest truths. The silo program wasn't listed on any map. It wasn't a hospital. It wasn't a clinic. It was an off-site containment and observation facility, at least according to the last line of Daniel's report, a place built to make people disappear. The building was 3 stories of stone and iron, tucked away beyond a dirt road near Brattleboro, surrounded by a tall wire fence. No sign, no parking lot, just a locked gate and a single security camera pointing down the gravel path. Michael and Lucas parked half a mile away and walked in the last stretch on foot. They carried nothing but their IDs, Daniel's file, and the same question neither had spoken aloud. What if he's not alive? When the intercom crackled, they were already sweating. A voice said, "State your purpose." Lucas stepped forward. "We're looking for someone. Daniel Eastman." There was a pause. "Are you family?" Michael stared into the camera. "We're his brothers." The gate clicked open. Inside, the air was sterile and cold. Walls of concrete and soundproof glass. The woman who met them was tall, mid-50s, wearing a dark gray uniform with no name tag. "You'll have 5 minutes," she said flatly. They followed her down a corridor so silent that even their footsteps sounded muted. At the end was a reinforced steel door. The woman typed in a code. The door hissed open. Inside was a large, dim room with a thick glass partition, a metal table on one side, a single chair on the other. And Daniel. He sat perfectly still. His hair was dark, longer than theirs. His face was sharper, older in a way that wasn't about age, but experience. His eyes were hollow. His hands rested on the table, motionless. When he looked up, Michael felt his chest seize. Those eyes. They weren't empty. They were waiting. Lucas spoke first. "Daniel?" The man didn't move. Michael stepped closer. "We're your brothers." Daniel blinked once, slowly. Then he said, "I know." The room didn't allow physical contact, but that didn't matter. They sat across from each other like reflections. Daniel watched them for a long time, then asked one question. "Is Jay safe?" Michael nodded. "Yes, he's in Pennsylvania, still silent. But he remembered us." Daniel closed his eyes. Relief flooded his face. "I tried to stop it," he said. "When I was 7, I figured it out. I remembered the room, the toys, the humming. I remembered all 3 of you." Lucas leaned forward. "What did they do to you?" Daniel opened his eyes. "They tried to break me." He looked at them both. "And I let them for a while." He told them everything about the isolation rooms, the behavioral tests, the medication trials, the reconditioning protocols, about being told the others never existed, that he was maladaptive, that his memories were delusions. "But I knew the truth," he whispered. "I remembered you, Michael. You always sang under your breath. I remembered you, Lucas." "You used to tap your fingers against the wall when you were nervous." Lucas swallowed. "They tried to erase us." Daniel nodded. "And when they couldn't, they erased me." Michael asked, "Why you?" Daniel looked at him. "Because I never stopped asking." The woman came back at exactly 5 minutes. "That's enough." Daniel stood slowly. "There's more." Michael stood too. "Then come with us." She said, "He's not authorized for release." Lucas snapped, "He's not a prisoner." According to our records, he's not a person at all. Michael's hands clenched. What do you mean? She didn't flinch. No birth certificate, no social security number, no registered guardian, no legal identity. He doesn't exist. Daniel added, They deleted me. Lucas stared at her. So what, he just lives here forever? Her voice was calm. He lives here safely. Daniel stepped forward close to the glass. There's a room on the 3rd floor, he said. It's locked, lead-lined. That's where they keep the rest of the tapes, the raw footage, files, names. He looked at Michael. Break the lock. Then he turned away, and the door hissed shut behind him. Back at the motel, Michael couldn't sit still. Daniel was alive, conscious, intelligent, and trapped. Lucas paced. We're not leaving him there. We won't, Michael said. But we need that room. Lucas grabbed the keys. Let's go back tonight. They returned after dark. Lucas picked the back gate. He used to do side jobs in high school for a locksmith, something Michael never knew until that moment. They moved like shadows, 3rd floor, east wing. The hallway was unlit. Michael's flashlight caught a small metal placard on one door. Archives. Authorized only. Lucas took out the crowbar. The lock snapped. Inside were rows of shelves, VHS tapes, hard drives, folders. They grabbed what they could. Then Michael found it. A folder labeled Project Cedarwood, Phase 0, initiated February 1989, lead investigator, Dr. Howard Klein. Objective, genetic separation of identical multiples for longitudinal tracking in diverse socio-emotional environments. Primary focus, behavioral plasticity and memory retention post-separation. It was all there. The names, the schedules, the separation plans. There was a chart labeled Predicted Deviation Timeline with 4 names, Daniel, D, Michael, B, Lucas, A, Jonathan, C. Michael blinked. Lucas froze. Wait, Lucas said. I'm A? Michael looked again. Yes. Lucas Bellamy had been subject A all along. Jonathan, the silent one, was subject C, and Michael, he was B. Lucas sat down hard. I always thought I was the strong one, he whispered. I thought they picked me last. Michael sat beside him. They didn't pick us. They engineered us. Revolution Principale. Michael pulled one last file from the shelf, a thick report labeled Final Outcome Projection, Intervention Protocols, if Reunited. He opened it. The page was titled Contingency 7A, Full Sibling Reunification. In the event that all surviving subjects reestablish contact, the risk of psychological destabilization is high. All known cases have resulted in recurring hallucinations, memory fusion, identity confusion, suicide ideation, recommended action, separation within 7 days post-contact, reintegration not advised, erasure protocol permissible under discretion of lead operative. Michael's mouth went dry. Lucas read the words, then whispered, They never meant for us to find each other. Michael stared at the folder. No. He shook his head. They counted on it. Michael looks at the bottom of the folder. A list of field agents is included, and the final name? Angela Turner. Embedded operative, assigned guardian to subject B. Michael stood at the foot of his mother's porch, staring at the wind chimes. They didn't move. The air was still. His hands were shaking, but not from cold. In his jacket pocket was the final page of the Cedarwood file, the one that named Angela Turner as a field operative, assigned to raise subject B, assigned to raise him. He didn't knock. He walked in. Angela was in the kitchen slicing apples. The knife moved slowly, carefully, like nothing had changed. When she looked up and saw him, her smile was real, familiar, warm. It made it worse. Michael, she said, I wasn't expecting. He held out the page. She looked at it, then at him, then set down the knife. Silence stretched. Finally, she whispered, "So, you found it." Michael felt his voice catch. "You knew." Angela nodded. "I knew." He sat at the kitchen table, she across from him. "No defenses left." "When did they tell you?" he asked. "I was approached in 1989, she said. "I was a nurse at the time, working the neonatal floor. They said they were looking for someone emotionally stable, no family, clean background. I matched every box." "And you just said yes?" She looked at him, tears rising. "I was 34. I had lost my fiancé in a car crash the year before. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. I just existed. And then they showed me a picture of a baby. His picture. They told me he had no one, that he was part of a developmental study, that it was for science, that I could give him a better life." Michael couldn't speak. Angela wiped her eyes. "I fell in love with you the moment I saw you, and every day after that, it was real, Michael. None of it was fake. You were mine." He slammed the table. "You lied to me, for decades." Angela nodded. "Yes. You let me believe I was alone, that I was crazy for feeling something missing." She nodded again. "I buried everything inside because of you." Now her voice cracked. "Because they told me if you ever found the others, they'd take you away." Michael blinked. "What?" Angela covered her mouth, shaking. "I had to report everything. When you were sick, when you asked questions, when you drew pictures of boys you didn't remember. I kept them all. I sent them in, because I thought it was the only way to keep you." Michael stood. "You were my mother." She looked up. "I still am." He stared at her. Then walked out the door. She didn't follow. Lucas was waiting in the car. Michael got in, silent. Lucas didn't ask. He just drove. They returned to Willow Ridge, to Jay. This time they demanded access, and they brought the files, the footage, the names, the proof. Under legal threat, with help from Karina Ramos and an investigative journalist she'd been feeding information to for years, they forced the release. Jonathan, Jay, was placed in a private recovery program with real care, with people who knew what had happened. Michael and Lucas visited him every week. Sometimes he spoke, sometimes he didn't, but he always hummed the song. 2 weeks later, they got a call. Daniel had escaped. No note, no sign of struggle, just a blank space where his file used to be. The staff claimed it was a clerical error. No one believed them, not even for a second. Michael began compiling everything, all the footage, all the documents. He turned their story into a timeline, a map, a digital wall of evidence. He called it the Cedarwood Files Truth Matters, even if they tried to erase it. It spread faster than he expected. Dozens of people came forward, twins, triplets, adoptees with dreams of another voice. Michael met each one, listened, archived. He didn't try to explain anymore. He just offered space for the pieces to come together. Lucas moved to Portland. They didn't live together, but they spent time rebuilding something they never had the chance to build. They started playing chess again. Michael taught Lucas how to open with knight to f3. Lucas always countered with pawn to d5. Old instincts, still there. Angela died 6 months later. Stroke. Michael found a locked drawer in her closet. Inside were baby shoes. His, a photo of the triplets printed from the VHS, still, and a note. "I'm sorry I was part of the lie. But you were never part of it. You were the only truth I ever had." Michael cried for hours, not just for her, but for the boy she raised, and the boy he never got to be. He, Lucas, and Jonathan met again in the summer. They sat by the edge of a lake. No cameras, no experiments, just the sound of wind through the trees. Jonathan held a small recorder. He pressed play. The humming played softly. Then Daniel's voice. "They took everything from us, but they didn't take us. Remember that." As the sun set, Michael pulled out a letter. It had arrived 2 days before. No return address. Inside was a single line. "You haven't found all of us yet." The photo was old now, faded. But Michael still kept it framed on his bookshelf. 3 boys, identical, barefoot, smiling. A red ball on the floor between them. He didn't remember the moment, not exactly. But his body did. His heartbeat did. That photo had once been proof of something stolen. Now it was a reminder of everything they'd reclaimed, even if not all of it. It had been 2 years since he found Lucas, 2 years since he stepped into that diner and saw his own face staring back at him. A lifetime ago. So much had changed, and so little. Michael still worked at the university, still walked the same cracked sidewalks of Cedar Creek, still wore navy blue jackets, even in the summer. But people greeted him now. Students asked questions. Librarians invited him to lunch. Henry Lim called him every Sunday. He wasn't invisible anymore. Not because people saw him, but because for the first time he saw himself. Whole. Broken in places, but whole. Lucas had started a foundation, Fourth Wall, a nonprofit for adoptees seeking answers. The name was Michael's idea. "Because we lived behind one," he'd said, "and now we're tearing it down." Jonathan had improved slowly. He spoke more now, especially with music. He'd begun composing small melodies on an old electric keyboard donated by a music therapist. His favorite one was called Room with No Walls. Michael kept a corkboard in his office, covered with photos, faces of others who had come forward, stories half missing, questions with no names. Some of them found matches, some didn't. But all of them found something, a voice, a thread, a truth they could hold. The letter still haunted him. "You haven't found all of us yet." He never told Lucas. Never told Jonathan, not because he wanted to hide it, but because he wasn't ready. He'd spent his life chasing shadows. Now he wanted to live in the light for a little while. Just a little. One evening he walked past the toy store again, the one with the dusty dinosaurs in the window. It had reopened. New owners, bright paint, laughter. But the dinosaurs were still there. Cleaned. Upright. Michael stood outside for a while, watching the kids run around inside. One of them tripped, fell. Cried. A man, his father maybe, rushed over, picked him up, kissed his forehead, and whispered something. The boy smiled again. And just like that, the world turned. Michael stepped away, but not before smiling too. In the quiet of his apartment that night, he put on the tape again, the old one, the original cedarwood footage. He didn't do it often, but sometimes the silence needed music. The grainy footage rolled. 3 boys on a padded floor, no sound. Just movement. They passed a red ball between them. Jonathan pointed at the camera. Lucas laughed. Michael stared at his younger self. Then he pressed pause. He leaned in, looked at the eyes, not scared, not confused, just waiting. Waiting for someone to remember them, to come find them, to say, "You're not alone." He whispered it out loud, to the screen, to himself, to anyone still watching. "You're not alone." He turned off the tape, stood up, and closed the drawer. Then, for the first time in his life, he left the house without his jacket.